A number of the attendees have stabilized a little bit, so let me maybe just do an introduction and kick us off. So, my name is Pavel. I'm a founder of Meiro. Look after product strategy here, and I work with clients and a little bit over spill to sales and marketing as well. So we are excited today to have in this series of talk where we kind of do these live fireside chats, interviews with partners, with people who are specialists in in our field of kind of customer data, customer engagement, and marketing. Have a special guest today, some friend to Meiro and friend to me, Paco Albie from Melbourne, Australia, founder of an agency called Immersion, digital consultancy. Paco's been in digital transformation space and customer marketing in last 10 plus years, and so one of the most knowledgeable kind of people who overlaps between technology and marketing as well, which is really always kind of interesting mix and skill set. And when we were chatting about what we are going to do today, what we could talk about live, he came up with a framework that they use at Digital Immersion for some of the clients, and kind of a really interesting framework how to apply behavioral economics into personalization. And obviously we're going to chat a lot about how do you derive value from the kind of underlying asset, which is the customer data, and how do you work with that. So this is exciting. Please do use the Q&A feature or the chat to put in the questions. We will we will pick it up and answer it in the second half, but we'll kick off with Paco's presentation and give him some space to share his thoughts. And really looking forward to the interaction and to the conversation and the Q&A afterwards. We still have some people coming in, so please do use Q&A in the chat for questions. At the same time, if you can't stay the whole time, don't sweat it. We will be sharing recording afterward to everyone who registered. So this is definitely being recorded. So Paco, stage is yours, and take us through your thoughts on behavioral economics and personalization, which is not the two things we hear in a single sentence often. So curious to hear your take as well.
I love it. Hello, everybody. Anyone who hasn't met me will know that I love a good buzzword, so I put my buzzwords everywhere. But I think today I'm going to take you through some of the framework that we at Digital Immersion do, where, like Pavel said, we're a consultancy that help people make the most out of their customer data. So I've known the Meiro team for a very long time, and use them with some of our clients here. And this is sort of the framework we help people make the most out of their data with. And I think to kick off, if you don't know what behavioral economics is, as a starting point, before I even get into what we're about to talk about, economics is a financial school of thought where you will make a commercial rational decision every time. Behavioral economics is the school of thought that people do not make rational decisions all the time, and there's mental modes that people shift into as they make decisions. And so buying into a luxury brand, as an example, might not be a rational economic decision, but is driven by other different cognitive biases and behavioral economics. So that's the frame up of what we talk around here. Let me go into my first slide. So there's a lot of research around behavioral economics. It's anyone who's listened to Freakonomics as a podcast will have known sort of the constructs that are going on there as well. One of the pieces of research that we really like to use as a business is it's a Google piece of research called The Messy Middle. Its origin point was 2010, or might even be older than that, piece of research called The Zero Moment of Truth, which was how someone went from getting a stimulus or a trigger, being like an ad, or seeing a billboard, or seeing a shop front, into purchase, right? And there was this zero moment of truth that everyone was trying to win in that moment. And like in my background, I used to work at Nike a while ago, and if you look at their merchandising strategy, it was all based around zero moment of truth. And you walk into a store, it's like, how do I win that moment? The messy middle is a 13, 14 year enhancement on that as a philosophy, and it talks around how good people are at leveraging different behavioral economics. So they looked at 6 cognitive biases, and so cognitive biases are ways in which the brain shortcuts decisions, right? And so category heuristics talks around this is how I shop for something, therefore that's how I will shop. The power of free is get this now and get a free something. Scarcity is we're running out of stock, only 3 units left, that kind of stuff. Scarcity talks around, I just did scarcity, didn't I? Power of free, I missed. Power of free talks around get something, get this free now. Social proof is you see it everywhere with reviews and people in your area buying, and someone just bought this, rated 5 stars. Authority bias is positioning yourself um, relative to the market. So we're the number one retailer for product X, and then power of now is based around generally delivery, right? Like get it tomorrow, get it immediately, write this review now, get this. And I'll show you I'll show you one example as we go further forward. But the next slide is more interesting. So, sorry, on the right, we talk around there's a trigger, which I talked about, which goes into people go from exploration to evaluation, and they're going back and forth in this loop. In that is the messy middle before they go into purchase, right? And so I'm exploring what my options are, evaluating where I'm making a purchase, back to exploring, back to evaluating, and then I go into purchase. And it's like, how can we leverage these mental states in that moment um, to deliver experiences? Why we use it as a business is an interesting one. And again, so there's a white paper you guys can Google it after. Google the messy middle and you'll see the latest white paper that's out there. But it talks around how when brands leverage this effectively, the ability to brand switch someone is significant. So there's a 13 to 87, depending on what category you're in. Some categories it's more challenging to switch people, but in some of the most high high moving industries like car insurance, there's an 87% chance that you can move someone from buying to buying a secondary brand just by leveraging these category heuristics, or sorry, cognitive biases, be it category heuristics or any of the other 6 that they talk around in the piece of research. So if you look in here, so they basically show someone a brand, go, will you buy from this brand or this other brand? They then go away, leverage a bunch of persuasive mechanics, and then they come back and go, which brand would you buy from now? And they managed to get a whole lot more to buy from the secondary brand, which was the non-preferred brand. So I pulled out those 2 charts. I think it's like a 70-page white paper. So they're the 2 charts that I found interesting to pull out. But you can see here as example, like car insurance, 87% of people went to the fictional brand, which was leveraging all those sorts of cognitive biases. Whereas before it was, I have to have a look, test my eyes, not going to spot on the fly. Oh, there it is. 40%, right? So they managed to switch a whole 40, what is that? 47% of people across. So a big chunk of people can move. It's tough without any feedback. In the Q&A, if I'm not making sense or this doesn't follow, if you've got questions, please put them in. I think they will pop up on my screen and I'll try answer them on the fly. How do we bring this all to life, right? So great, there's a philosophical framework out there that says, hey, if I tell people about the power of now, I will make more money, I'll get people to brand switch. Great. How do I do that? Right. And so we kind of take people through 4 steps to deliver that. And so first things first is centralizing your customer data. If you have not centralized your customer data, if you don't have the intent signals, if you don't know people exploring versus evaluating, what are they typing on your website? If you haven't captured that data and put a single view of customer over the top of what phases they're in with more longevity than in the moment, it becomes really challenging to deliver. So one of the steps is always going to be how do we batch in centralized data to make some of these decisions, build these cohorts of people to show where they're at. We then put once you've centralized your data, you need to build user journeys, and we generally look at sort of in a consumer context, we'd look at or retail context, we'd look at sort of the four phases. So pre-purchase, you've never bought from this brand before. What's going to make your decision to make the first purchase? After your first purchase, what can I do to get you from the first to the second purchase, and then second to third, right? And at that point, generally, there's a I mean I'm not sure what the number is per brand, but some of the research we see, once you get someone to the third purchase, you're at like 70% loyalty over time, right? And so the the trailing economics behind that deliverable are very high. We then create a scorecard, right? And so all these, what we do to get someone from never bought from you to bought first time to second time, and we built a. This is a fictional one. This is not a an actual client's one, but we would go through and build what we would call scorecarding to get how do we get you from stage 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3 here, right? And so in this example of the how do I get you from first to second purchase, we pull out your data that we've aggregated and we build you a scorecard and we say, here's the impact of making certain things happen. So every time in here, as an example, we get you to buy in 2 categories in your first purchase, there's a 10% or 9.49% chance that we can get you into the second purchase. And so how can I leverage some of these behavioral economics to drive that action that I want? And so I'll give you some examples of how we bring that to life in the writer review as an example here. So we've got this person, they've made their first purchase. I know that if I can get them to write a review as a business, I have a 10% chance of getting them onto the next step that I want them to do. The next action that's best for me is you to make a second purchase. But before then, what are all the steps I need you to take before you're going to do that that I know will increase my chance of making a second purchase? And so writing a review is that. And then what we would do is throughout these user journeys that we've built, we would go, you're between first and second purchase, you're in the exploration phase. I need you to write a review. How can I leverage some of these cognitive biases in that moment? And so we've thrown 2 examples here of the power of free and the power of now. And let's say as a business, we're willing to give away some socks after someone buys some shoes with their next purchase because that is economically viable for us to do because socks probably cost us, I don't know, 10 cents in the end. Plus shipping costs probably breaks you, but if they're buying something else, you're okay. Um, so there's one example on the left of the power of free. And so this is where we talk around want some free socks as the email subject. Hope your Jordan 1 purchase was great. Write a review and we'll give you a free pair of socks, right? So we're talking around free. Getting free stuff will convert you, and I'm willing to give you free things to write the review because I know that that will impact your ability to make or your likelihood to make the second purchase. Power of now on the right is limited offer, right? So how do we time bound it and go, you have to give us a review within the next 24 hours and force you to create that step? Still giving you a free pair of socks. We've just reframed it to have a different cognitive bias. Right, and so we would split test this throughout the user journey and see which one delivers the best outcome. Pavel, your hand is up. Have I missed questions?
Yes, we have a question, one I'd like to keep for later, one I would like to maybe take now. There's a question on the scorecard specifically. If you can keep them in the CDP, or kind of what would be, if you maybe can talk a little bit more about like how would this be maintained? What's the mechanics around it? Because I think the content is pretty clear. Like what people maybe miss is where does this live, and how often, how live, how real time this is, if at all? So that's a great question.
Very good question. So where does it live? So it probably lives in a couple of different places. I would say where your data science lives is where it lives because it's going to be a model that updates over time. And so if you're running data science in a data warehouse and you're using like a Databricks or a Snowflake to do some of your modeling, it would live in there. Ultimately, these are yes, no's, right? They're kind of like, has this happened? Yes, no. And so that attribute of have they written a review would sit in the CDP. So ultimately, the predictive impact of that would live wherever your data science componentry lives. Um, the actual attribute you would surface in the CDP as a yes no flag and then activate against it appearing there or not. So you
Hmm.
would build your cohort of people who have made first purchase. In this example, so made first purchase would be yes no, then has not written a review, right? That would be your second flag. That would be your cohort that you build in the segment and you activate with.
Yeah. So these are effectively business rules that define a segment of people in different language, right?
Correct.
Hmm.
It's so the constructs behind this help you define how you can push someone through your funnel, right? Like if you view the bottom steps as your funnel or your user journeys,
Hmm.
the more I can get you to do before the next action, the more likely I am to get you to do the next commercial outcome action for me, right? And so the
Great. So I think
reason,
I think for other people and kind of marketers who do not have this sort of economic science background, it probably would be close to what people would call a lead scoring effectively.
yep, yep.
Which might be just a bit more rudimentary. This is a little bit more systemic, right? So this is cool. Got a couple more questions. Let me kind of pick them from the chat here. Some I'm going to keep for later, kind of on purpose, but
I think I'm at the end of
specifically.
my preso too, so fire away the questions. Keep
Good.
firing them away.
Good, good. So there's a question on keeping a performance of the scorecard over time. So how does this evolve with say a example of a customer, and how do you kind of utilize this over time, especially the changes in there? And I think kind of second part of the question is like how fixed would these frameworks be? Because I can imagine very easily situations where a reviews are simply like a public reviews are not available and you're gonna have to do without it. So how much would you adjust this type of scorecard per
Yeah, so
customer? Maybe if you can give us two
yeah,
examples.
this scorecard would be there's components of this scorecard which we would generally see in every retail scenario, and then there's components of this scorecard which are completely bespoke, right? So um I think I've got in here bought in the colored range, right? Like that might not even exist within your business. We have people that are not in the retail environment and their scorecard would have absolutely none of these in there, right? So we would build a scorecard per customer in our business. That's sort of the deliverable from within our business, um, within our data science capability would be to give you a scorecard. And then I think your other question was how frequently are we updating? So we generally revise the model daily to see how accurate it is and see what sort of fit we're getting within the model. And then we would probably do a business review quarterly in terms of, hey, this is the current model. We've just launched a new line. We've just expanded into this. All of a sudden, we offer new features. We would factor those in to the scorecard. But
Mhm.
behind each of these lines, there's probably more rigor than the scorecard gives credit to as well. Like um, we would check the impact of or the correlation between one and the other, right? So if you're going to do one, you're probably going to do the other. So we take that into a factor and we find sort of the point of statistical change where you would hit an impact, right? So why is the number 5 weeks as an example in the first line on this scorecard? Why is it not 2 weeks, right? And so we have process behind building that as the coefficient that we're using.
Mm. A couple more questions on this topic, kind of following it. So let me see. Um, a simple question: how do we track performance over time of each scorecard? I think you partially answered that, but any kind of other thoughts on that?
I think generally the performance of the scorecard we would almost bind to. So yeah, there's kind of two pieces to it, right? Like how accurate it is, right? How well this model fits your outcomes. So that is being refined over time. It's not like we do it once and we're done. And then validating people who don't get any experience as a baseline too, right? So we probably, which I haven't got in this slide, but we would have a whole back of people who don't get any experience. right? How likely were they to buy? So there's always a holdback within the group until you determine that there will be no holdback, or certain businesses will perpetually have a holdback. So it'll depend on your business and probably the scale of customers that you have to do a perpetual holdback.
Mhm. Great. Um, Another question related to this is, would you be building different ones for different segments within one business, or would this be more universal per brand?
Um, we generally do them universally. We don't do them
Mhm.
within segments. We would. Um, yeah, we haven't
Super.
done one segmented by
So
different business units, but
a
we might not have had
question
a client.
question I have. I can see how this could, this is something that someone like a Nike would invest into, and big brands you work with, right? So maybe talk us through where, from your kind of a consultant hat perspective, where does this make sense? Where does this not make sense in terms of business sizes, kind of impact it can generate? How would you talk to client who wants to do this? Is too small, too big? Is there something like that? What's the kind of, is there a golden ratio to who should be using this approach, and how to think about that? What's the kind of implementation of this looking like for brands that might be interested?
Oh, okay, good questions. Is there a baseline to doing this? I think if you've so one of the challenges we see in the market, mainly in Australia, was a lot of people bought CDPs and then struggle with volume of throughput, right? And it came in to do 5 use cases. It did those 5 use cases, and then it kind of sat there, and it's still adding the value because those 5 use cases were the lowest hanging fruit and delivered a lot for them. And then all of a sudden they struggled with throughput. And so this kind of frames up volume of throughput for them, right? So I'm tabbing around in all my screens here a little bit, but if you think around this scorecard, we'll have probably 20 factors that you can test. We'll have at least 4 stages we want to test. So there's 80 tests we want to do. Multiply that by six, minimum six cognitive biases we want to try and bring to life in those journeys, right? There should be at least 80 use cases we're getting out the door, minimum, right? So I think volume of throughput certainly helps. In terms of what size they have to be to do this, I think if you're big enough to have invested in a CDP, you're big enough to do this. Otherwise, you shouldn't have invested in a CDP. You should be running an ESP, like just send emails.
So how are you thinking about this and CDP relationship? What does this? Why is CDP important to do this, or the other way around?
It's omni-channel activation, right? This talks around building user journeys and activating them in a moment based on dynamic decisioning. That is what a CDP does, amongst other things. But it will give you a CDP will generally give you a good single view of your customer. It will get all the interactions that it's had with your brand, and then have an audience API that you can trigger a real-time experience against, be that email, web, media, app, whatever your channel is, SMS, push. The activation point happens through the CDP by knowing you're in this moment and how you define and split your audiences throughout those moments. So whether you're going to be in the control, whether you're going to get the power of now message, whether you're going to get the power of free message, whether I know what media you came from, and I know that the creative you landed on this page from contained an image of a promo code. Therefore, you obviously care about discounting. So power of free is going to resonate more. So I want to deliver that message to you through my next comms channels, aggregating that view up and then hitting a single point to activate is one of the key throughputs of your CDP.
There's a Thank you.
Did I answer
Those
your,
were
did I answer
interesting.
your question? I feel like I
Yeah,
talked for a bit.
yeah. I think so. I think so. I think so. I think the answer is fairly simple. Is CDP means more signals about any individual consumer. Like if you kind of start multiplying, when you look at traditionally, the recording is typically done in CRM, right? Where you would know transactions. In your marketing automation, you would kind of know a behavior with campaigns. And within your website analytics, you would know the web tracking, but like on a device level and not necessarily on a human level, right? So you kind of are binding all of these three sources of signals together, and you're ending up with something like 100, 200 data points per customer over time on a really solid timeline. Therefore, any type of scoring that's done on top of that, it will be leveraging, it will be using this data as a leverage, this data volume. So I think more denser data set, the better outputs from any model, be it economical behavioral one or any other model applied on top of that. I think that's the kind of universal view that I have.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the probably the scale of the data science behind it might scare some businesses, but that would probably be the only, I mean, that's part of our product offering as a business. So like,
Mhm.
we would offer you that as a service, but that might be the one limitation where the prediction's going to sit, who's going to do the scorecarding, who's going to build the coefficients, who's going to make sure that there's the model fits, like that kind of effort is probably a challenge for some businesses. But also I imagine with the way that AI seems to be uptaking, right? The challenge and the throughput risk of that isn't as great, and the ability to scale out all the deliverables is getting better and better, depending on how much faith you have in the AI production capability and the modeling capability out there.
So we'll touch AI in a little bit. I've got a couple questions around it, but while we're kind of going through the questions here, the question if we can use test price anchoring using product recommendations within Meiro. How would you answer that?
Can we use price anchoring for product recommendations within Meiro? That's a very good question. So price anchoring is another cognitive bias. I think there's like 180 cognitive biases. And so that piece of paper that I talked around had six. Um, can we use price anchoring within Meiro? Yeah, you would, right? Because you'd build a correlation between the set of products, right? And you find similar attributes between them and you'd rank them against each other and you'd price anchor one product relative to another in real time and present the right product. Or you present all three products anchored to what you want them to buy in the end, right? And so
Yeah.
you could have retail price presented and then your profit in the back end calculated. And so in that moment, you'd go, price anchoring is the cognitive bias of the works. They land on the category page, therefore present these four products at the top and have them all anchored to each other as a query together.
Mhm. I think
Right.
there are components to that question that are kind of separate but come together in one use case, right? So can you do a testing like creative testing, or can you do multiple versions of something when we are talking about like web layers, web personalization? Yes, we can. Can we track it down to user? Yes, we can. And can we run a recommendation models inside of a CDP? Yes, we can, and we often do tailor to customers because black box here is quite bad idea. So yes, you can as a use case. I think this is a good idea. I'm not really sure what you would kind of follow specifically with that that kind of a price anchor. I think that's more of a how do you present an A/B test, the kind of formatting of those campaigns, but that has less to do with the recommendations. But I think one thing that I noticed, and we do very successfully with one customer who is in retail space in kind of a beauty supplements products, where they have it's a large brand of kind of drugstore pharmacies where they have quite a few of their own private brands, right, and private label brands. And what they do is naturally that they would want to sell in terms of the market share within their own business, they would want to sell more of their own brands because naturally they carry higher margin for the business, quite logically. So what they do really successfully with us is a site or category personalization, where we because we measure these things, we know that when there's personalization within a kind of category product listing where versus no personalized content, there's 100% uptake in the conversion rate. So that's already great, right? But when we know that when the within the recommendations, when the customer is buying and interacting with a private label product, which has somehow specifically built in more weights into the algorithm, so the algorithm prefers it, especially when there is a lower pricing point on that compared to other things that the algorithm would recommend to the customer. So it's effectively swapping brands. That's what she talked about there. The conversion rate goes up another 25%, and obviously the margin does follow that in proportion. So this is really interesting and really useful. Can we see that we can track this type of information and the type of impact? So I think that's super important. So another kind of a set of questions here, or going a little bit more into AI, because it's unavoidable to have a conversation for 40 minutes about marketing and not touch AI these days, right? So is there any plan to leverage AI and to make these scorecards better, or are you thinking somehow about what type of kind of bit more broadly this question, what are you thinking about AI tooling as an impact on these type of relatively old standard techniques, right? Like how will the implementation of this change? What are the possibilities? Kind of the previously, maybe firm boundaries. How is this changing?
Yeah. All right. Good questions. Good questions. I think in terms of I like to think around the content creative, right, is generally the biggest blocker for most businesses. Is like scaled content creative is really hard. And so
Yeah.
it's great for me to have six cognitive biases. Imagine if I came to you with 100. Um, can you give me 100 pieces of creative to test which one's the best? No. So like how can we produce that at scale? There's a seen a few people do it. We haven't done it yet, so I won't profess that we're doing it, but people using AI to test whether that will work before humans see it. So it's like you do user research with an AI. I've seen it kind of like feels a little bit off to me, but people are out there doing it.
Mm,
So maybe that will come. And then quality of the model is probably the biggest one that we look at, right? Like ability to get the model to fit an outcome is always challenged by human intervention, right? So human intervention costs us money, costs us resource, costs us people. The more we can get AI to deliver this model, and the moment it finds something else impacting the scorecard, update the scorecard in a moment, right, and deliver against that. So they're probably the things in terms of AI. We'd probably see that in the long run. Um, but yeah, they're kind of it for me. But it'll be interesting once we get to AI generation of content where businesses are comfortable enough setting it loose without quality control over the top of it. That part for me feels like it'll help a lot of production. But it's also a business risk, right? All of a sudden the AI promises 80% off and you can't deliver 80% off. And then all of a sudden you got to find out how the hell that happened. So are you good enough at setting the parameters behind what it can deliver for you? But I always think back to like 10 years ago, I was working at Country Road Group, which I don't know if anyone's from Australia, they know what that is. Otherwise, you wouldn't. But it's a big fashion house in Australia owned by Woolworths from South Africa. And we spent all this time building personalization capability. And then we went to the marketing team and said, "Hey, do you know now we can personalize the homepage? Let's personalize the homepage." And they said, "Great, but our photo shoot for current homepage was 6 months ago, so I can get you that homepage asset in 6 months." And so we sat there waiting for 6 months to deliver what was a
mm,
very technically challenging deliverable at the time, but the content just wasn't ready, right? And so we just couldn't even deliver a men's homepage versus a women's homepage based on an attribute. So I always think like if they were comfortable with AI in that moment and those kind of things catch up, all of a sudden your delivery at the front end isn't bound to that.
I know, I understand that this is something that kind of there's several bottlenecks here, right? Kind of content personalization, production, and I think control and governance that's going to come up in a second layer is going to be a big one, right? So like you kind of avoid these hallucinations in different shapes, and kind of kind of unfortunate thing about creation and generation by AI is that if it's less than 1% from perfect, it's not perfect, and people can see that, right? So like this is unfortunately not quite there, but yeah, there will be a kind of a flipping point where it just is all of a sudden going to sound and look to us completely normal. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's kind of how AI is changing this a little bit. Question here, a bit more kind of technical on CDPs and how you think about that. There was a question around how do you think about composable CDPs that someone's made a comment that their IT is asking brand to evaluate it and have a look at it. So what's happening with a composable space in Australian market and in your kind of a vantage point?
Yeah, it's kind of like the headless craze, right? The headless craze of a while ago. Everyone needed to have a headless website, and then they realized how incredibly hard it is to maintain all the componentry that exists behind the headless website. And then all of a sudden, the monoliths were back. Send them in. It feels a bit the same. Like there's, I think generally what I would see is people are buying headless to solve, oh, sorry, buying composable CDPs to fix one problem, and then they realize that they've missed out on other components, and then all of a sudden they're back to the monolith in some capacity and realizing that the structures are wrong. And so there's generally the way that I've seen it in places is IT's made a selection and then marketing doesn't know how to do anything with that selection because it solved one problem that they asked IT for this data and all of a sudden that data existed and they're like, look, we're there. We need to compose this. And then it's like, who's going to do the audience resolution? Oh, we haven't thought around how we're going to do any audience
Yeah.
resolutions. Okay, well, that's a useless product to me now. So now I can do 20% of what I need to do. And then all of a sudden IT becomes another big bottleneck because all of a sudden you're missing tables and data warehouses and infrastructure that you need there to deliver things. So I think in the end, you look at sort of which components, and we generally look at 8 components that we'd look at anyone buying a CDP, and we obviously run RFPs for CDPs in the market. We'd look at 8 components and go like, how are you going to deliver against these 8 things? Because generally in a composable CDP, you're buying 8 different products, right? You're buying them from somewhere. So you're generally buying identity resolution somehow. You're buying web tracking. You're buying data warehousing. You're buying the customer marketing interface to build segments. You're buying the ETL tools. You're buying the webhooks. Like there's a bunch of functions you're buying in that moment. And the reason people have gone for these components in that very moment of purchase is they solved one thing without realizing the other things they needed to solve. Does
Yeah,
that answer
it's
your
a
question?
it's a tricky topic. Honestly, I think it's something that puts a little bit more of a power back into the hands of IT, the composable approach. I understand kind of in some of the legacy CDP vendors, the kind of the first generation, why there's questionable success or really like a hit and miss approach with a lot of the kind of first gen CDP implementation. But at the same time, it's a marketing project typically, and the main user is marketing. And if you end up with the data in the data warehouse with zero interface on top of that, then you've probably created bigger gap than you had before. So I don't think this is really helping. And I think to me, the second issue with that is that I think brands and not just enterprises but every brand really likes predictability of costs, right? And I think there's a kind of a part of a story that the composable world is not telling you on purpose, which is how much is it going to cost you to run all of this, all of these special queries and segments and IDs and whatnot in through the data warehouse. Like, what's the cost of compute? So you kind of focus on the licensing cost there, but like you kind of see all the other overhead and the maintenance of that solution, that you need a team, you need know-how, you need documentation, as well as the runtime of the data warehouse, right? So this is a little bit more complex than it may
I think
seem initially.
I think the resourcing is probably what breaks most people. They don't realize how many resources they need. It's
Mm.
great to have it in your data warehouse. Have you got a data scientist and a data engineer in your business to do this? How many do you have? How much free time do they have? How are they going to go about like we just started doing an RFP for a client and like to do composable, there's probably 4x just in headcount. So you need a 4x your headcount to deliver it in the end. So we kind of see the gaps there. It has its place for certain things too as well. Like if you've got a massive data engineering team and a massive data science team,
Sure.
and you can deliver identity resolution yourself within your data infrastructure, then you're probably at a good cost base. Great. Let's leverage that resource. But I don't think we don't talk to many businesses that have that capability.
Yeah, that's kind of a view I share as well. Paco, I think we are slowly out of time. Last question from my end. If people are interested in the topic here, kind of would like to see this something like this implemented in their businesses or need an advice on that, how do they reach you? Where do they find you?
Well, that's a good question. It would have been good of me to put a slide up with some sort of LinkedIn link or something like that, or a link to our website, but I wasn't prepared enough for that as a
Mhm.
terrible salesman that I am. But you can find me on LinkedIn. I think my name might be like globally unique. So if you search for
The only
Paco
one, right?
Albie and there's another one in the world, I'd be shocked. But if you can find them, go for it. Add them, but you would probably be adding me, or else. Our website is digital-immersion.com. You can visit us there and shoot me an email, or my email is first name dot last name at.
Super. We'll link contacts into a follow-up, and we share the recording as well, so people
Yeah,
can reach out to you. So thank you for the time today. This was super insightful for me as well. Great to chat always. Thank you for questions to the audience, and for spending this almost an hour now with us this morning or this afternoon, whatever time it is for you. And we'll be sharing the recording, and it was a great moment of learning a little bit about behavioral economics and science in marketing. Thank you, Paco, and thanks everyone for taking the time to join us today.
thank you, mate. Thank you, everyone.